I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to Slee Rickets. Thank you all for listening. Thank you too if you have taken the time, maybe over the holidays, maybe when you were home with your family, you took a moment to mention the show, just to let somebody know about it who might enjoy it. If not, then please turn to your neighbor on your dog walk or your dishwashing session or your coffee house hangout. Nobody's at a coffee house anymore. I miss that, but it doesn't seem like that happens anymore. Wherever you are, tell someone about the show. I appreciate it, and it makes for a growing and a robust growing audience. I think that's part of what I like about the listeners that I have is that they tend to be sticky and they tend to be engaged. So let's keep it that way. Let's just keep telling the cool people about the show and see what we can do from there. So thank you all. Thanks also if you have subscribed to The Secret Show and getting some new subscribers lately. Thank you. Welcome. Also, in addition to getting new episodes, bonus episodes, there's 25 up now and more coming, about 3 a month, I think. We've done 3 so far this month and may do a 4th before the end of the year, but maybe not. We'll see. New episodes all the time. Also, this new chat function, which is like a little private thread on my phone with a bunch of listeners having arguments about Japanese poetry and the Northmen and the Smiths, and how hard it is to get into Threepenny Review, among other things. It's gotten real lively lately. So please do join up and come put in your 2 bits there. Go to sleerickets.substack.com and sign up tonight, whenever you're listening to this. It's coming out real late. Sorry about that. I had some shit to catch up on. Speaking of which, this week's episode is going to be kind of an inside out one, or there was a trend. I don't know if it's still in place. Last time I had my toes in the academic world, there was a trend of doing what people called I think they called it the inside out classroom, something like that, where they would do homework in class and then lectures at home or so. I don't know how this worked exactly, but that's sort of what we're doing today. So what I did is Alice had a special request. She wanted Brian and me to discuss a story called Car Crash While Hitchhiking, which I'd never heard of, or I knew the book it was from. I hadn't read it, but Brian knew it very well. We got into that. We had a great discussion about it and some other things. But before getting there, we were sidetracked for a long time by a bunch of trivial shit, including some of our classics, impractical thought experiments, nonsensical sex jokes, Brian's stubborn insistence on some insane, untenable principle having to do with a just sort of so profoundly cynical a view of what makes writers write that it becomes almost inscrutable, as well as inadvertent mockery of one of my beloved former guests. So I said, well, what I'll obviously do, as I would normally do in a case like this, is I will release our conversation about the Dennis Johnson story on the main feed, and I will save all of the ill-considered madness for the Secret Show feed, except that Brian then insisted that I do it the other way around. So that's what I'm doing. This is an Inside Out episode, Inside Out Classroom today. Today's episode is all of the stuff that got us sidetracked before we actually got to the story. And coming out soon on the Secret Show feed will be our conversation about this terrific story and some other things we got into after that. Since this is coming out on the main feed, though, I do feel as if I should make a point here of saying I just read today the recent piece that Amit Majumdar published in the LARB, the Los Angeles Review of Books. It's a piece called Essay on Iron, and it is written in rhyming heroic couplets, or rhyming couplets in heroic couplets. not closed. Typically, they're pretty loose and open in an unpopian way. But this, like his previous essay on repetition, it has the same form and some similar qualities. This one is way looser in its meter and certainly in its rhyme. I would say that overall it's less perfect than Essay on Repetition. He claims that it's a first draft in the poem itself, which, as we discussed before, may or may not be true, but it feels pretty true in this case. This does feel fairly first drafty. But I would say in to compare it with Essay on Repetition, this is less perfect and more moving. It's maybe just because it gets into it gets into being a parent as well as getting older. So it's a poem about weightlifting, which I weirdly have had a very similar experience to Amit Majumdar in this. I started weightlifting as a scrawny kid and have continued, more or less daily since then. My experience of it, however, has been wildly different from his, or at least the way he seems to interpret his. It just seems like the way he talks about it is so, he imbues it with meaning and he connects it to poetry in a way that I certainly had not myself, though it's quite convincing. He says, for example, in talking about how you should never compare your gains in weightlifting with anyone else's, he says, "The poem's I is someone to compete with. I strive to beat the man I share my seat with. When living, lifting, writing, self-revision, each rhyme a rep, more weight and more ambition, will grow my karma as I grow my work. From strength to strength, each birth a clean and jerk." And he connects this sort of elaborate conceit to Hindu vision of reincarnation and progress over many lifetimes, which he is of course a practicing Hindu and I'm a practicing nothing, so that accounts for some of the difference there. But it is for being like, for having so much subject matter that I'm so familiar with, it was a really strange poem to read. It's very lucid, but I found it to be a very different set of experiences. He of course has some sons, which I don't have, and he talks about sort of forcing them to start lifting weights, and then the strange experience of seeing them as he himself is declining in strength and beauty. His sons are entering their prime, and he sees these great, powerful figures coming home to watch over him the way he used to when they were children. He says, "And now they're men, and only visit here. My basement set up quaint, with a low ceiling, their college fitness palace more appealing. Two dark-haired giants standing at the head of Daddy's flat bench, nodding, 'Go ahead. Just breathe out, Dad, you've got this.' So I push, the weight, stall, grimace, feel my whole head flush, until two fingers cradling the bar remind me who I am and who they are." So I found this, like, again, as I said, more frustrating formally, but more touching as a lyric. And so I recommend it. I will put a link in the show notes. And in advance of everything Brian has to say in this conversation, I just want to invite Amit to come back on the show anytime he likes and make fun of Brian to his heart's content. With all that in mind, please enjoy this utterly chaotic and nearly content-free conversation. So in the story, there is a to my mind, very prominent, miserably wet, cold sleeping bag that,
Yeah, definitely.
to me, like when for like a year after I quit smoking, anytime I like read a book or saw a TV show where somebody smoked a cigarette, it was like, oh, that was a great Graham Greene novel about the guy who smoked cigarettes. And so like nothing else. So to me, like I have such a horror of being like wet and cold that it just like the guy draped in a dripping sleeping bag was like, that's what the story ended up
That's
being
worse than
about.
like the murdered wife, right?
Yeah, exactly. But but it also clarified for me this thought experiment that I have like puzzled. Oh, I mean, I haven't puzzled over it, but I have been puzzled by other people's responses to it, and it clarified it for me in a way that I thought might be interesting to you, because I think I have. So typically there are these two questions, and most people answer them in like a parallel way. You're so excited about this, I can tell.
No, no, I'm just resting. I'm tired. I'm listening. You can't. I'm allowed to rest. We're
Rest,
gearing
rest.
up for
Yeah,
this. I
yeah,
need
yeah,
to
yeah.
get the energy ready. No, no, I'm not. I'm not holding my head in critical anticipation. I'm just resting.
So there are these two thought experiments. Most people tend to answer them the same way. My intuition is that you will answer them in opposing ways,
Well, let's
but
hear
I
it.
could be
Let's
wrong.
do it.
Okay, so the two questions are, if
Should I wait until I hear both questions, or should I answer them one at a time? Or
uh,
is that not how this works?
yeah, well, I think you can let's just hear both of them, and then you can say what you think. Yeah. So the first
Okay.
one is this idea that people have proposed that like occurred to me in the midst of a bunch of weird surgeries I had. I know you've had some surgeries.
I haven't had surgeries. I wish I could have had surgeries. No, I
Right.
just have an undiagnosable neurological disorder that I've seen hundreds of, probably close to 100 different medical practitioners for it, but none of
Yeah,
them
yeah,
were
yeah. None of them were
surgeons.
surgical. Yeah. Well, so I had this little stretch of a few years where I had like three not insignificant surgeries on like all on like my brain and my balls, like the places you least want to have surgery on. And
Yeah, bad
I,
places for the
in the
surgeries.
middle of that process, like after at least one and before at least one or two others, I this thought occurred to me, which was that, and I'm not the first person, but like you're put out during surgery. You don't think any thoughts, you don't dream any dreams, you don't feel any feelings, and then you come back after surgery. And the anesthesiologist described it as being like a temporary coma, basically.
Yeah, so
Um,
I've had endoscopies and colonoscopies, so I've
right.
had that
Were you? But
feeling where I
you didn't
was.
have general anesthesia for that, did you?
I
Or did
did.
you have?
I
Oh, you
did
did.
general
Okay. All right.
anesthesia.
All right.
Yep, I've had
Okay.
general anesthesia 3 times.
Yeah. So the thought that occurred to me was, well, is it
Is this one of the questions yet? I'm ready
we're
for the
getting there. Yeah, yeah,
questions.
we're getting there. So the thought that occurred to me was like,
This
is
time.
it possible
Okay.
that instead of just completely putting you out, anesthesia simply paralyzes you, and then you experience the full horror and excruciating agony of surgery,
Mm-hmm.
and then afterward
Mm-hmm.
you have no memory of it. And
Right.
there seemed to be two people who like very quickly and intuitively split into these two camps. One of which is that makes me think neither I nor anyone else should ever have surgery again, because that's an unthinkable horror. And then the other group says
Right.
like, nah, well, who cares? I don't remember it, so what does it matter? And my
Right.
intuition, well, yeah, so I have an intuition about how you'll answer that, but then that's one
Okay.
question. And then the other
Okay.
question is the like they're different versions of it, but it's the like the it's either the teleporter question or the upload your brain to the cloud question, where like if there were a way where a machine or some kind of like artificial network could perfectly replicate every neuron in your brain
Right.
and produce basically a perfect copy of your consciousness, and then your physical body died but that carried on,
Mm-hmm.
would that does that sound fine to you, or does that sound like basically, do you think like, is that me or is that not me? And then there are a couple different ways of coming at that, but like I'm curious because I have suspicions about how you will answer those questions, but they don't line up with how I think most people would. But I'm presuming too much. So tell me what you think first.
So for question number one, I'm not gonna be in either camp. I would say I would care deeply if I were suffering during that and had no memory of it. But I'm enough of a believer in modern medicine, and I think it's worth that suffering if I don't all that suffering for the procedure.
It's worth that
So I'm
suffering if you
closer to the
don't
second camp.
if you don't remember it.
Yes.
So
I'm not
why?
saying I'm not in the who cares camp,
Right.
because I do experience like a frisson of horror to imagine
Sure.
that. and I think that there's that horror is real and is worth weighing. But I think that I would take, even if that were the case, I would still go ahead with the surgeries and the
But
general anesthesia.
but to you, it matters that you don't remember it afterward.
Oh, it matters profoundly. Yes.
So what if anesthesia instead was just a perfect paralytic agent so that you could in no way interrupt or damage the surgical process, but you would fully experience and later fully remember everything? Does that change it?
I wouldn't want to do that.
But you would go through it even if you could fully experience everything as long as you basically had no memory later.
Right. I have found in having a chronic illness, I have found moments of intense pain a lot more endurable since I've experienced a chronic illness, knowing that those moments of intense pain would end. So the in the midst of a chronic illness, when I didn't know whether I would be incapacitated for a week, a month, or years, or the rest of my life, um, the uncertainty of that, the potential that this was going to be the rest of my life, was far and away the worst part of the chronic illness. I was incapacitated for the day, but not knowing whether it would last another day, a month, a week, a year, or forever. That was the worst part. So, for example, since when a kidney stone attack, or whatever one calls it, a kidney stone blocking my the passage into my urethra, that was severe pain, and people talk about it as like the most severe pain in the world, and it definitely
Yeah.
was the most severe pain I've ever experienced. But I think within the context of feeling that chronic fear that I would need to be in some kind of pain or disorientation or incapacitated forever, dealing with chronic pain in that moment was less overwhelming, less profound an experience than I think it would have been had I not been able to measure it against chronic pain. So it would be terrible to know that I was going through surgery and experience all the surgery while being preserved by that paralytic agent or whatever you called it, but and not being able to fight against the surgery. But knowing it was short-term pain, I think I could deal with it and still go on for the long-term benefit of the surgery.
But the question is not whether the pain is short term. The question is whether the memory is short term, right? Like you're not the pain is going to end either way, but the question is whether or not you remember it afterward.
But what does the memory of pain mean? Is it just remembering having experienced pain? Like in the same way that I remember having the kidney stone now, I would remember
Yeah. Well, I
the
mean, just
pain of
like what it
surgery.
sounds like you were saying almost the opposite, because just now you said that when you had the kidney stone, the memory of that chronic, like less acute, but more horrifying chronic pain was actually helpful to you.
Yes, it was, and you're right, and I'm wrong, and I would be enduring the pain if it meant long-term benefit.
Yeah.
You don't seem satisfied with my answer.
Yeah,
Are you
that seems
dissatisfied?
right. No, no. I mean, because I think to me, like the
I
obviously
mean,
the
but I
heart.
don't want that. Who would say
No,
they
no, no.
wanted
Nobody
that?
wants that. Nobody wants that. I mean, though it does make me think about like people before anesthesia, right? Who did have surgery sometimes, and like
Oh
they
yeah,
just
I would
strap
I
them
would
down and
bite
like
the
they bite
proverbial
something
bullet.
and
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, and sometimes even like in a way, like a battlefield amputation is like horrifying, but in some ways like less horrifying than like, well, we need to go in and cut the cancer out of your abdomen, and so like we're going to take
Totally.
you into this theater and just strap you down. So I think like to me like the horror is compounded by the knowledge or the suspicion that like a nobody outside realizes that I'm suffering, and
Yes.
b like I will not even care about this later. Like both of those things
So
would
you
I think
would
would make it
so
more
you would
infuriating.
prefer to have everybody, assuming there was pain, you would prefer for you to remember the pain and for everyone else to acknowledge that pain than
Yes, if it
for
had to
it
be
to
there.
appear.
Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah, yeah,
agree with that. I feel the
yeah,
same
yeah,
way.
yeah.
I feel the
Okay,
same way.
I totally had you wrong. I thought you'd be in the who cares camp.
Who cares about pain that you don't remember?
Exactly. Yeah. Which like Joanna
No,
is like
because
very firmly and immediately in that camp.
No, because the severity of the loneliness in experiencing
Yeah,
that
yeah,
pain,
yeah,
because when you're experiencing the pain, you know that nobody else knows about it in that
yeah,
moment, right?
yeah. And they think you're
Yeah,
fine. They think like, yeah,
that would be terrible.
yeah.
That loneliness would be the worst part.
Okay, so then what about digital you?
So this is, you build the boat back and all the pieces are the same pieces, but is the boat still the same?
Well, they're different versions. Like like the teleporter question, right? Is a transporter teleporter a
Right.
like a magical traveling device, or is it a murder machine? Right? Like, do you
Right. No, I
just
get
like
that. I
dissolve somebody and then like build a new that guy with the same
So
components?
would I mind if I were a new that guy?
Or
If I
like,
were a
like
new version of me?
yeah, like they're different versions. Like one version of that question would be like, would you be would that would you be cool with it if you like were teleported, like meaning like you were dissolved but you were perfectly copied and reproduced elsewhere? And then a different
No,
version of
I
that
want to be
question is,
me. I
yeah,
want to be me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so then
I don't
and
want
then
to be some other me.
the different
I
question,
want to
because
be
like,
the me.
yeah, well, in part, like, so that one involves like opting to die, which is not, which is like not great.
I don't want
But
to opt to
then
die.
the other version would be like, so when you do eventually die, is it
Yeah, I'm gonna die.
in any way reassuring to you to think that, like, if it were possible to perfectly replicate your brain and make some kind of digital or physical copy of you that would then carry on after your death, like, is
But
that,
am I that guy, or is just that guy interacting with other people as me?
well, so there are, so this is the thing, is like this, the people in my experience who say who cares to the first question tend to
Yeah.
say it's you, same thing, it's perfect copy, same thing, there's no difference. And to me, like, there's a huge problem, which I think of as like the continuity problem, which
Yes.
is which and so but this story helped me with this question, because instead of thinking like, oh, you get dissolved or you die and then there's a new you that pops up elsewhere that's a perfect copy, I thought, oh, well, what if instead of dissolving or dying, like, you got copied, and then the like you who just got copied go into one room, and you climb into a dripping wet cold sleeping bag and you lie there for an indefinite period of time, and then the meta you goes into the metaverse and like makes love to your meta wife and like eats a delicious meta taco. Like, then like clearly there's a like clearly you can't any longer say like, oh, it's the same thing, right? Like that's like that continuity problem, I think, is the is
Right.
what Dennis Johnson helped me resolve. Does that make sense?
In
I
but
mean, that makes no
in
sense,
what?
but
No, no, no. I mean, it might make sense, but do you see parallel existences like before and after the sleeping bag in this story?
no, like there's no parallel. There's one existence that then branches. I think what people have trouble with is if there's like one existence with a blip in the middle. And the other thing is that, like,
Yes.
the meta you, the copy of you, he experiences continuity, right? Because he has all the memories of everything up to that moment, and for him,
Yes.
he is you. So in his mind, he says, "Oh, well, it worked. It's just me." But the you that goes up to that moment has to crawl into the wet sleeping bag.
Because of drugs.
Well, not drugs, but like, I'm saying, if instead of being dissolved in the teleporter, like, you got into the teleporter and then a you appeared a million miles away, but the you that got into the teleporter now has to get into a wet sleeping bag, like, that would be like, no, this is not good. Like, this doesn't work at all. This is a terrible invention, right? Rather
Right.
than just like, if I just like cleanly vanish, then there sort of feels like thing.
Right. But what does it have to do with the car crash while hitchhiking by Dennis Johnson?
So this was a story about a wet sleeping bag, Brian. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's all. Like, it's not all I got from it, but it's like 90% of what I got from it. But yeah, here,
How
okay. So
bad it would be to have a wet sleeping bag?
I kept thinking, he was like, and then I lay on my sleeping bag in the car. I was like, oh, it's still wet. Oh,
Yeah, he
he's like,
used
and
it
then he
as a
draped it
pillow.
around
Yeah.
me. I draped it around me like a cape, like the
Yeah.
wet sleeping,
Like
and
a
you're still
cape.
in the rain. He's like, he lay down in the rain in the sleep. It just, oh, it's just unbearable. And yes, there's also some horrible violence in it. But so Alice sent this lovely, lovely message, and boy, it's been a while,
No,
and
no, no.
I
Hang on,
really miss
hang
her.
on, hang on.
Yeah.
I feel like there was this big run up. I let you down. I don't know what. I don't understand. I get the hypothetical. I wouldn't want to feel pain when no one knew about that. I wouldn't want a new version of me to go make love with my. And also, there's a sleeping story. I feel like
Yeah.
there was a epiphany. I didn't grant you there. I didn't afford you.
No, no, no. I think
What was
the
the
so
aha that the listeners
you
were gonna going to shudder with revelation when I got to it. I didn't give
So
that to you,
you're
but
a
you wanted it.
very, yeah,
Wanted it.
you're like a very practical, unsentimental person, but you're also a like a
Am I
skeptic.
unsentimental?
Uh,
The
you
very few things
seem
I love deeply and profoundly. And if they were taken away from me, my life would be ruined.
no, I think you're emotional, but I don't think you're like I think of myself as be maybe I correlate sentimentality with gullibility. I think
Okay.
like
Okay.
the same version of like moments before when we had this audio problem, we thought we got it fixed and my immediate instinct was like, well, there's like a 50-50 chance this whole recording will be ruined, but let's just go ahead and do it anyway and then we'll see.
Yeah,
And
it's
your
a
response was like,
bad
well,
instinct. Yeah, the bad
we
instinct.
should like check it first to make sure. Like we should confirm. Like this is the
Yeah.
same person who was
Verify.
like get receipt for the tape. Like what are you talking about? Like that like I think like that distinction is what like I think of as being like the me that gets hung up on like, but my unremembering self will have suffered. Like, and Joanna's just like, this
I
is so
see.
fucking stupid. Like, my assumption is that
I
you
see.
would be in the camp of like, stop, boy, what are you worrying about?
Right. So I ruined the question because I made it too real in my own life.
No, no, no. I think it's
When was I
like,
supposed to say yes? That unlocks the Dennis John for me as well.
oh no, it has nothing to
There,
do with the Dennis Johnson story, except that this is the story about the wet sleeping bag. Like the wet sleeping bag helped me because I think there's like a lot of people have
oh,
trouble with the idea that like you just die, but then there's this new you that pops up in that teleporter
I
slash
would imagine everybody had
like
trouble with that.
well no, but like that's what I'm saying is like lots and lots of people just say like there tend to be like the main two responses that are
How many
digital
people have you
consciousness
asked
is
about this?
stupid. I've
Okay.
asked a few people, but I've also like it's a kind of question that comes up in different versions that I've heard a number of
Right.
people and like a lot of people just
Right.
very intuitively say, of course it's me, who cares, whatever. And
Right. I don't feel that way.
and then other people tend to say it's a stupid question, who cares, right? But like very few
I don't
people
feel
say
that way
like
either. Yeah.
right. So I think like you have the minority response, which is oh no, like it really matters that the continuous me that like walked into that teleporter then gets dissolved and then there's just nothing. And
I see. And
I was replaced. Like I
if the
think
other me had to go sleep in a wet sleeping bag all this time,
well, no,
I
if the
wouldn't like
you that I think like
the original me.
the nothing that either
Right.
the vanishing or the dying you facilitates the illusion of continuity, facilitates the illusion that like oh it's still me in the metaverse. And I think
Got
the
it.
wet sleeping bag ruins that illusion. Like it's like no, that your continuity is not like a clean vanishing into the nothingness. It's a wet sleeping bag forever.
That'd be really uncomfortable.
It'd be terrible. It's like
Yeah, you couldn't
Dostoevsky's
get a good night's sleep.
do you remember in I think it's Crime and Punishment where he's like, what if the afterlife is just a dark small
Yeah.
room with full of spiders?
I think that crime and punishment is yeah, that made me giggle.
You know.
That's not yeah, that'd be bad. That'd be bad.
Exactly. Especially if you knew that there was another you who thought he was the same you who was eating
Right.
tacos
Who didn't
and
need to be
yeah,
with all the little spiders.
right. Who
Yeah.
was like, yeah, it works. No, it's cool, man.
Is this what
So
Alice wanted us to discuss?
no, this has nothing to do with this. Is definitely not what she wanted us to discuss. So I'll quickly read her like part of her note because it talks about the story and a number of other things in and she's just lovely and I am going to talk to her soon. It's just been a while for silly reasons. She says in my I mentioned the rat bag thing because she called me a rat bag and I embraced the term. She said in my
It's a
world
good phrase.
it is. A rat bag is a charming someone who enjoys a bit of trouble and knows exactly how much trouble his charm will get him out of, which is a nice little definition. She says, I recently listened to an old Paris Review podcast episode that included the story Car Crash While Hitchhiking by Dennis Johnson and thought of sending it to you and Brian, but I always feel like recommending American short stories to you guys risks coming off like someone recommending I Have a Look at Man from Snowy River, which is too anxious. She's too anxious, as she always is. But because this is lovely, I'm glad she recommended it. And then she goes on. She says, "I would love to hear you both talk more about this arrogance, humility, faith, and writing thing. To me, the whole sitting down to write and channeling Charlemagne idea is completely foreign. The closest I can imagine is thinking, well, some poet once was a Charlemagne, and he probably influenced a few people who went on to influence some others, some of whom are sort of closer to me, and maybe I could try to be a bit like them. I mean, how do you find the wherewithal to decide you're going to write a bloody novel?" So that's what she wanted us to discuss. Shall we start with Johnson?
I don't know. I'm just interested in that whole premise that Alice comes to that I think a lot of sincere writers come with, which is the idea that like you're sitting down in order to have some effect on someone. Like, isn't that built in the question that like how dare you sit down to write a poem or a novel because it's obviously not going to be very good, or nobody will care, or it won't matter, or no one's going to be changed, or you're not a genius, or isn't that what's built into it? It's like, how isn't there like a self-doubt inherent in that? It's like, how dare you do this work?
Yes, though I think the question does land slightly differently if it's how dare you versus how dare I.
Sure.
Yeah,
How dare
yeah, yeah,
one? But like,
yeah,
why aren't we all sitting there paralyzed with the thought, like, how dare I sit down to do this? Like, how dare I
yeah, yeah, yeah,
presume that anyone will give a shit? Or how dare I foist my work on other people?
yeah. So you,
Right?
I know that the Charlemagne bit, which was came up in the conversation with Amit Majumdar when he cited Napoleon screaming "I am Charlemagne" in the midst of the middle of a battle, which is kind of
I had to
cool.
turn off that interview
Um,
way before we got there. Yeah, fill me in
so what I was
on
going to
what
say,
led to.
I know
As
that
soon as he
you are,
started citing his own rhyming essay, was that what happened? He's reading with glee an essay he wrote in rhyme. I turned that one off.
yeah,
But yeah, go ahead.
Brian Amit Majumdar is number 1 million fan. So we,
I'm sure he's good at whatever he does, but who gets on the mic and says, "Well, like, now let me read this essay I wrote that I wrote in verse." Well, I don't. I guess there's an audience for verse essays. I am just not a
it, it,
member of that audience.
coincidentally, it heavily overlaps with my audience. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So all you Slee Ricketts listeners who when they read an essay, you're like, this essay is pretty good, but only if it rhymed. Then I'd really love reading this essay. You found your home, Slee Ricketts. Welcome to the big show. But
Yeah. I'm going to
needless to
make you
say, because
read
of a
Alexander Pope
shortcoming
next.
in me, because I that's not the way I like I don't know, receiving information. I stopped. I turned that Slee Ricketts off. But again, that's about me. But tell me about Charlemagne. I missed out on Charlemagne.
Okay. So I asked him, I brought up the fact that some of my listeners, and I didn't in the time name you explicitly, but I brought up like some of my listeners, and you're not the only one, found him very arrogant. And, and
Wait. So in the interview where he quoted his own essay in rhyme,
yeah.
you accused him of potentially being found arrogant by some of his listeners
Well, I said
in
some
previous
of,
interviews.
I said some of my listeners
Right.
found him arrogant in his You should really listen to the show, Brian. It's pretty good.
I do
Yeah,
listen to all of it. The one time the one key to unlocking my turning off an episode is when someone quotes their own essay in rhyme. I don't That's a genre that does it for me. I just can't. It's like if someone brings like sloppy sandwich into sex, I'm like, okay, can't have
sloppy
sex anymore.
sandwich.
Yeah, it's like
I like the
that's
idea that
not
you can power through
that's
anything.
not
That
what I
nothing
want.
else will turn you, but like the sloppy sandwich is that's
Oh,
your
it's
kryptonite.
disgusting. Could you imagine like sweet kisses and like starting to disrobe
Mayonnaise.
and then like honey, I dipped this big sandwich in a pitcher of water and brought it into bed with me.
Not even.
I'd be like,
It's not like a
that's
barbecue
just
sandwich. It's a wet
sloppy.
sandwich.
Yeah. I'd be like, that's one sloppy sandwich. I'm no longer interested in making love. That's the equivalent. This is an analogy, Matthew. The equivalent of that
So
analogy
Sleeper
is
gets
when
is making
someone
love, and
quotes
Ahmed
his own
Majmudar's
his
first
own
essay.
essay that where the sentences rhyme with each other in the essay. So I listen to the show just like I make love with my wife at the except if she brings a big sloppy sandwich into bed. Can you now continue about Charlemagne?
I hope you're listening, Alex. Take notes. No
She
more
doesn't
sandwiches.
listen to this.
Of course, I hope not. All right. So rather than being the honey around the rim of the cup, the verse is like the water you pour on the sandwich to ruin it, to make it
prefer,
inedible.
I prefer the image of a big hoagie, like a big sandwich that you don't pour out, you dunk it. You dunk it into a
Like a
pitcher of
biscotti and
water.
coffee, like you did. Like it's
Yeah,
you just put it in a big bucket
but
of
like
water.
for giants. And
Right.
then you tuck it under your arm like a baguette and you bring it
It's the opposite
into
of a
your
baguette.
marital
It's like a
bed.
noodle. You tuck that under your arm.
Yeah. No, I'm saying it's not like a baguette, except insofar as you tuck it under your arm to bring it into bed with you. I don't that would be a big turnoff for me. Just like when I listen to Slee Ricketts and someone quotes his own essay in rhyme. Can we get to the point about Charlemagne?
Sure. So when I mentioned that some of my listeners found him arrogant, we then talked about the question of whether a little bit of arrogance is necessary in order to make art. And he said that there's a story that in the middle of a battle, Napoleon, while leading his troops on, he was heard screaming at the enemy, "I am Charlemagne." Well, like that Napoleon was a
So
little,
Napoleon has an ego. What's this
had an
guy's
ego,
point?
right? Well, no, but the apart from just the funniness of that story, I think the suggestion, and that he talked a little bit about this in his own experience, is that you have to be humble. You have to be willing to like cut and throw away your work when it's not good enough, but you also have to have a little bit of a little bit of cockiness. You have to be willing to. You're still thinking of the sandwich. What if you
So
carried the sandwich into bed
sloppy.
with sufficient panache? What if you acted like you'd brought the best surprise, the best like honey, have I got something for you? You're gonna this you're gonna love. You would be
Things have been
carried
a little
away. You would
vanilla
be
lately,
convinced.
but I think things have been a little stayed lately. So I dunked this sandwich into a pitcher. Um, all right. So the point is that you need to be full of yourself to write fiction. I don't believe that to be true. I don't believe that people. I shouldn't talk about people. When I write, I am writing because the act of writing makes my day feel like it was spent in more meaningful a way. And I want to have published works in the world for my own ego. And I think that my perception of people's thoughts and why they do the things they do is acute enough to earn my occasionally having these published works in the world, which I makes me happier. I think it's just purely based on ego for me, for you, for Amit, and for almost everybody else I know who writes.
So what is the difference between that and what he said?
I don't think that there's anything special about me. I don't think that there's anything. I don't think a muse sings through me. I don't think I'm particularly smart or capable. I think that I do this because I want to. I arbitrarily set this goal for myself, so I'm trying to work hard to accomplish it. And I don't think I am special for having these things. I think I've developed craft enough to write and to be entertaining for some people. I think I can entertain some people on the page, but
Yeah.
I don't think entertaining people on a page is a particularly impressive feat. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, okay, but this like the I do this because writing makes my day feel better also feels a little bit like the altruism thing where you say like, oh, you're only giving money to charity to give yourself a boost. Like, well, I mean, maybe sort of, but also like it only gives you a boost because you actually to some extent believe in it. Like it only makes your day feel better because you have some credulity, like you to some extent buy
Fine,
into what
fine,
you're
fine, fine,
doing,
fine, fine.
right?
My larger point here is when artists talk as though they think their work will help others, I immediately lose patience for them and think they're lying. I don't
Yeah.
think that people are doing this for other people. I think they're doing it for themselves. and that's the case with me, and that's the case with you, and that's the case with
Sure.
Amit. And I I don't think you need a particular grandiose sense of self if you're just sitting down thinking like, I'm going to entertain some people.
Yeah, okay, but hold on. Like I do feel like there's a little bit of an equivocation here because I think you're right that I think I totally agree with you that like thinking that you're writing in order to help other people or like teach them something or like make the world a better place. I think that's folly, but it's also
Right.
not quite.
Essentially, that there's no moral or didactic purpose in our work.
Yeah, I mean, even, when there is a purpose, I think there's seldom an effect. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's intended, but it's not. Yeah, it's not a very good tool for doing that. But I also think
Which, by
that
the way, I think is the main point that makes Car Crash While Hitchhiking by Dennis Johnson land so hard in that final line, which is, and you ridiculous people, you expect me to help you. I think that what is so powerful about this story is he acknowledges the ridiculous futility of somebody who's trying to write for an audience, meaning on behalf of that audience, or to better the audience, or to have any real benefit other than a superficial brief one. I don't think
yes,
you need to think full. I don't think you need to be full of yourself to be. I think you need to be full. You need to be full of yourself to be a sage or something like that. And I have no interest in being a sage, and I don't think any
sure,
of
yeah,
the.
but being full of yourself feels like that. Like again, that's a blurry characterization. I think like
But
there's a
then, what is the
difference,
characterization? What is the characterization that Alice asked you or you asked Amit?
right? I mean, to me, it's less about I'm sent by God to make the world a better place, and that so it's important that I write this book, and it's more about like in the moment you're writing it, thinking oh yeah, I'm gonna get him with this. Like this is gonna get a rise out of him. This is gonna surprise him. This is gonna thrill them. This is gonna make him laugh. Like I get like I the excitement I feel and the arrogance I feel in the midst of writing is like an excitement at the idea of the response I can elicit from the reader using what I know how to do with words. Like that's exciting to me, and like I have to have
So is
some
that any
belief in that.
different? So is that any different from the response from? Let me give you a hierarchy of
Sure.
jobs. Then is that any different from a stand-up comedian who's just landed on a good joke, or who's
No,
tinkered his or
no,
her way into a good joke?
no, no,
All right,
no.
is that any different from a, a sex performer who figures out a way to especially titillate by holding her body in that way?
I mean, I think it is any different, but I think in terms of craft, no, not really. Probably like in terms of one's sense of one's own excitement and belief in oneself in the moment, probably not a big difference.
Is it any different from a teacher who either in the moment or preparing for class has a way to get students engaged in the material?
I think it is a little different there. I think there are some strong similarities. Like definitely teachers have to be entertainers as well, but I think there's something of like a larger mission and a larger commitment with teaching than with like writing fiction or poetry.
Right. So basically, what I've attempted to lay out, maybe unsuccessfully, implicit in my mind in what Alice and you were talking about is the writer stands apart from the average professional. You know that
No,
like
no, no, no. I don't think so at
that
all.
there's something especially really you don't think inherent in Alice's question or in Amit's answer is that there is something especially self-important or daring about sitting down and thinking like this is going to be literature I'm producing?
I think that there are some, I don't think all tasks and occupations and vocations are equivalent in this way, but I do think, I mean, I feel like I've even in that episode or in some other episode, I mentioned the Gucci models and I mentioned athletes and like I think there's some
Yeah,
kinds of
I listened
tasks.
to those episodes.
Yeah, well, so there's some kinds of tasks that require that kind of in the moment self confidence and like belief that like it's not just that I'm saying like I'm writing this because I wish myself to be important or I'm writing this because I want my day to feel good. I'm also thinking like I'm writing this because this is going to be fucking awesome. Like people like this is gonna be like awesome for somebody to read. Like I'm excited
Right. And I
about the
don't have that.
experience I
I
can.
don't
No, you don't have
no.
like I mean, there's it's like it's like riddled with and surrounded by doubt, but in the moment, I have to have some like commitment to
I
that.
have the excitement of the athlete in the moment, thinking like I'm on a roll. This feels good.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm getting at something here.
Yeah,
But that seems typical of a lot of professions,
yeah.
a lot of jobs.
But I think it's not typical. I don't think it's all jobs or all, but I think like anything that involves a kind of a performance, there's a certain kind of suspension of disbelief and like leap of faith into this like slightly ridiculous task we're performing. I think like fighters. I mean, I think like there are a lot of things that are very much like it, and I think there are also a lot of jobs that are nothing like it. And then there's some range,
Well,
right? Like
I think
teaching involves some of both.
jobs that you do rotely for money tend not to include. Like
Yeah, exactly.
if I take boxes from here and I
there's a
move them over
spectrum, right?
there,
There's a spectrum. Yeah,
that's something
sure.
different. But I'm not just being obnoxious here. I'm sincerely questioning your appraisal of their questions. Your question for Ahmed and as for us. Implicit in that is that we are undertaking some sort of task that stands apart from teaching middle school English or shooting jump shots or
I
being a
think it's
dentist and
yeah,
fixing a root
sure.
canal. And I'm
Well,
saying no. I'm
you don't
saying
think it
it's
stands
the
apart from
same
being a
thing.
dentist and fixing a root canal? I think it probably stands quite apart.
You don't
I
think
think
it's
that
about the dentist like getting it right, and I don't know what dentistry words are, but like I
sure.
don't.
No, I think they do take
I'm
like pride in their craft. I think there has to be some like you know sense of flow certainly with certain procedures and things. But I do also think like if there's a way in which writing stands apart, and even like different kinds of writing, it's a matter of degree. It's a matter of like where they stand on a spectrum of like how much craft is involved, how much talent is involved, how much luck is involved, how much actual practical like application there is, how much reward there is. Like I think that all of these
I agree, but
factors,
I
yeah,
think that the yelling "I am Charlemagne" going into battle
yeah.
is in its own category compared to what we are talking about, what writers or athletes or teachers or dentists. I would put writers, athletes, teachers, dentists in one category and a general
Napoleon.
trying to go murder an army into another category.
Sure. They're
I,
more alike than
and
they are like the generals
no,
were.
but I don't think
Yeah.
that's a straw man. I'm saying that I feel none of what general feels into battle. I don't that does not feel right to me. And so I would agree with Alice there.
You don't feel moments of
I feel
grandiosity when writing?
no more so than when teaching.
Okay.
And I think that most people would say a part-time middle school English teacher does not have access to the same grandiosity as an artist.
Huh.
And I'm saying those people are wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean,
They're,
teaching, I think teaching and teaching well, and like you are a very like engrossing teacher. Like I do think that there's a lot more performance and a lot more like entertainment work in that than people give it credit for. And even like watching like my daughter's birthday party, the magician, like he did magic and that was impressive, but like even more impressive was like the way he controlled the crowd of kids, just by like how he talked to them and his body language and all. Like there's like that's really impressive. And so I think people are too dismissive of teachers in that way, but I also am
wait, but hang
surprised
on,
that
because
there's no.
if you're willing to put a birthday party magician in the same category as what we do, then you're totally on my here. Because
Well, I'm saying it's a
I would be,
spectrum. I think it's not a matter of kind. It's a matter of degree.
and I would say that a birthday party magician and a teacher are at more or less the same degree as a poet or a novelist.
Maybe I think that the like it matters that there is actually more of a practical social benefit to teaching, and it also matters that there's a like a financial, like a straightforward financial foundation there. And I think novel writing and then poetry go sort of further and further out on a ledge of like both aimlessness and self-indulgence, and they get further away from any kind of practical involvement with the world, and more into a realm where like things like just pure luck and talent and whatever else weigh in, whereas teaching and birthday magic doing are more have more like reliable craft elements to them. Like
Yes,
we need an army of competent but not saintly or brilliant teachers. We don't really need that for poetry, right? Like
no, but
we kind
that's
of,
not what the original question was. I agree with you, but
sure,
the question to my ear
but I think
was,
those aren't, that's like
how
those are
dare you
related.
sit
Yeah.
down? How dare you sit down with enough self confidence to think the world will give a shit about what you're doing?
You don't
And
have to just like, you don't have to convince yourself to some extent that the world might give a shit what you're doing about what you're doing when you're writing it.
no, I don't. I don't, because I don't think anybody
So,
gives a shit.
so you're writing, well, I don't, that's the thing is like, it's both and it's like both total self-loathing and humility and like acute temporary targeted arrogance. Like I have to believe in what I'm doing as I'm doing it, even if for every other minute of the day I have total despair and doubt about it.
And you think that's what they're talking about? Just the potential of belief is just that, like, belief in what? Belief that there's merit to it, or belief that someone might read it one day,
That like
or that it matters.
I imagine the mind of some, like I imagine my own mind as a stranger reading it and being excited by it. And so like it's that anticipatory excitement and that goal, like that target, like I'm aiming to create pleasure and excitement and fear and whatever else in the mind of a reader, and it's anticipation of that experience that gets me excited as I'm writing.
Yeah, I just don't have the reader in mind when I write.
What?
I have I have the I find it pleasurable to put into language the petty gossip and thoughts that I have all the time. And then I know that to do it professionally, I have to have the craft elements of plot and inevitability and stuff like that in there. But I don't. And sometimes I think, oh, cool, look what I just stumbled, like, look what I figured out. Good, go me, and it's fun. But I don't know who reads the stuff I write. A few thousand people. I don't. Who reads the stuff
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
write?
yeah,
A few
yeah. But
thousand people. I don't.
this is
I'm
like
not.
this is but this is the I mean
This goes back to guts. It's not gutsy to me. It's not. You don't need particular,
no, no, it's
like.
not gutsy. I don't
So
think it's
what is it?
gutsy. For me at least, like I couldn't do it if that the feeling of like doubt and and meaninglessness and failure that like you're describing, I
Mm-hmm.
totally share that. But if I could never suspend that, I don't think I could write.
I don't think I ever suspend that.
Wow. So you're really like Elizabeth Bishop, like writing is purely its own reward.
No, no, no. Writing, I wouldn't do it if I didn't think I could get published. But it's ego. It's getting published. It's public acknowledgement that I need. It's the combination of the act of doing it and public acknowledgement for having done it. I like both of those things.
Yeah, sure, of course. I'm with you there. I guess I just think like I don't know. I mean, to me, it's sort of like sober brain versus sex brain. Like the concept that like you like walking around in the world being the ridiculous person that you know all of what makes you like physically and mentally ridiculous as you walk around your life, and the idea
Yes,
that like
I do.
somebody would engage in sex with you just seems absurd. But like in the moment you're actually doing that, you have to sort of be like, yeah, man, yeah,
Yeah,
this makes
totally.
sense. You have so that's what I'm saying. Like it's that for me. It's like in the moment, I feel like it makes sense that I'm having sex with this poem. You know, I have to believe in
Yes,
it in the
I'm
moment
just
of
saying
doing
the
it.
reason why it makes sense is because I enjoy the act, not because there's some external audience ready to
No, but
benefit from it.
you can't you have no sense of like you have no imagination or anticipation of someone else's pleasure as you're writing.
No, the pleasure would be if I saw somebody reading my book on the subway. That would feel great. The
Yeah,
actual thought of that
sure,
person
that
alone
too.
with my words, I don't know. I can't get that far.
I don't understand how you could be. I mean, like, I definitely believe lots of writers write that way, but they tend to be writers who are very dry and dull and unpleasant to read. Or totally believe that Toby Martinez de los Rivas writes that way, and that's why and it completely jives with my sense of his reading writing is like highly intelligent and maybe sort of objectively impressive, which is like utterly joyless as an experience. Whereas your writing, it's like very lucid and funny and human. So just it's bizarre to me that you don't like have a kind of a recursive process where you're imagining readers taking pleasure in what you're writing. Like you're not like
Yeah,
making
I just
adjustments with
don't.
that pleasure in mind. It's like yeah, it's bizarre to me.
I don't know. I'm making adjustments to try to get it right. I
Right?
don't
How? But what is that? Right by what measure?
to try to articulate, forgive me, UN Cheever, but like my vision of the world, like to try to
Okay, but I feel like
find the
you're
language.
there. It's like, but to whom? Right? To somebody. Right? If you're talking about
But
articulating it
I
and getting it
wrote
right.
I wrote diary entry. I wrote journals my whole life. I it's a one of the very few sources of pleasure for me is to sit down and write thoughts down. I don't like that, and team basketball with a bunch of people who aren't very good, like, are the things
Yeah,
I
yeah.
doing. Like I
Huh.
don't know. A lot of people like going to concerts. Like I don't like that. Like I don't
Sure.
I have no idea.
Picnics. I
I
don't
don't
like.
know.
I don't understand picnics. Yeah, like people like
Yeah,
standing out in the
picnics,
sun and being
concerts,
sticky
parades, the
and
beach. Like I
ants
don't
and
people
not
most
having
like
any
people
back
enjoy all
support.
these
Yeah,
things. I don't
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Class outside, like
Oh,
I don't want
class
to do that.
outside's the worst. Yeah, let's have
The
class outside
worst.
today. People are always so excited
Yeah,
when they mention it too. Like, I have an
yeah.
idea. Hey, what?
It's so nice today. Let's have class outside. Go fuck yourself. Why would I want to? What are you
Horrible
talking about? There
idea.
are no chairs outside. Who has the posture for class outside?
That was this week's show. You can find the actual conversation, really good one, Brian and I had about car crash while hitchhiking, on the Secret Show feed coming very soon. Go to sleerickets.substack.com and sign up today. You can reach me, as always, at sleerickets@gmail.com. And with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.